It is sort of Americana fits very squarely within that, but yeah, but it's I don't know that deco thing.
That's
That's
deco
deco
style
style
that's
that's
really
really
evocative and
evocative and
stylish in
stylish
its
in
own
its own
right.
right.
And
And
whenever I
whenever I
imagine
imagine
my
my
own
own
stories,
stories,
it's
it's
very
very
much
much
within
within
that
that
kind of a
kind of a
setting.
setting.
You
You
know,
know,
it's
it's
very
very
much
much
the
the
clothing
clothing
of
of
that
that
period,
period,
and
and
the
the
machinery
machinery
is
is
styled that
styled that
way,
way.
and
And
yeah.
yeah, so
So which
which
I
I
try and
try and
sort of
sort of
convey
convey
through the
through the
artwork and
artwork
through
and
the
through the
descriptions and
descriptions and
everything.
everything.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
but
but
I
I
don't know.
don't
Will
know. Will
anybody ever
anybody
get
ever
to the
get to the
bottom of
bottom
it
of it
eventually?
eventually?
It's
It's
and
and
figure out
figure
a
out a
definitive sort of
definitive sort of
this is
this is
steampunk,
steampunk,
this is
this is
dieselpunk,
dieselpunk.
these are
These
all
are
the
all
other
the other
things.
things.
It's
Well,
Well, I think that the issue with because when it comes to diesel punk, when I listen to the types of stories, type of heroes, it's so close to the pulp fiction is also still a genre,
yeah,
and when I look at both the aesthetics of the authors who call themselves pulp and remake stories like The Shadow and those types of heroes,
oh,
and when I look at
yeah,
like steampunk, sorry, diesel punk, it's so similar.
it
And
It
is.
is.
yeah, and I think that if diesel punk sought more of a connection with pulp, and I think there is already quite a powerful connection there.
Yeah,
Um, but when it comes to the aesthetic itself, and especially in the aesthetic department, it really starts to drift now into this tactical esque thing where you've got like these World War II esque soldiers with medieval or other historical elements mixed in.
yeah,
It's really all that, and I think Lysat said it too in the or previous meeting. Everything is military when it comes to diesel punk, whereas
yeah.
yeah, I guess what people associate with steampunk is also the Art Nouveau. So
Yeah.
I think that diesel punk is becoming very is very focused on the military stuff, very much on the like World War II propaganda esque stuff. We have like American heroes and Nazi baddies.
Yeah.
Um, and steampunk for some reason is more free spirited, that it goes like in all directions, and fantasy and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't know, like I don't associate, like I realize that a lot of my stuff will attract to diesel punks. That's what I assume. I'm very surprised that people consider Danker Lexicon steampunk. I would think that people would say, oh well, that's diesel punk or something. I asked people, like, what do you think that what kind of aesthetic would you associate with Danker Lexicon? It's like I never get a real answer out of that. I find it very curious.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that I find, which I think is, I don't know whether it's deliberate or just a coincidence, but one of the great things about both steampunk, diesel punk, atom punk, everything, pulp as well, um, it almost seems designed for multiverse, alternative history type stories,
Now that's where the multiverse
where
idea comes from. It comes from pulp.
absolutely, and it's just it's perfect. So you can, yeah, and particularly when it comes to costumes, you can have folks turning up in their Victorian best, and other folks turning up in sort of an altogether more sort of interwar year period sort of outfit or military from a slightly later age,
Mm-hmm.
and the fiction that sort of binds these things together, or the idea that binds these things together is, well, it's a multiverse. Some worlds are more advanced than others, some worlds less. Some of the things that, in one world, Queen Victoria died when she was, much younger. In another, she, was sort of preserved by the new technologies being discovered, and she's still alive in, sort of 1935, and leading a war against sort of, I don't know, some monsters or some other sort of power. And I think you see that with a lot of things. You see it with like Kim Newman's I Know Dracula, that kind of story where the past has just been changed by what seems to be a relatively small detail. Dracula actually succeeds in his plan, ends up sort of becoming the queen's consort, and in the process, the queen is, or Queen Victoria is forever young but trapped in this relationship with this ages-old vampire. And all of that kind of stuff, it could easily sort of fall within the same multiverse.
Yeah,
You could read one and then go straight to another.
well, I mean, it's the idea why I created the Association of Ishtar, so other people could like experiment with their timelines and steampunk ideas. And that's also for the reason why I don't want magic in the universe, because if you start introducing that, that's the end of it essentially. But yeah, and and I really hope one day that more writers will contribute. I will actually, for those who back the project, even if you do so for just $1, will get a story by one of our first contributors, Mark. I forgot his Brandon, steampunk author, also kinds in a very similar style to mine, very Robert E. Howardy. And he once wrote a story for the Association of Ishtar as well, which the backers of the Kickstarter will get. So, yeah. And with that being said, I hope more will follow, but we'll see where this adventure goes.
Yeah. So I was going to, off your question, I was going to ask about, I mentioned that, I had a few false starts. When it came to writing and creating, and sort of finding the way that I needed to work to actually finish a story. And I've heard you talk about your work quite a bit, but I don't know. How did you get started? And was it a smooth transition? Did you have a few false starts yourself?
Well, I guess I had a false start. I originally I'm a dyslexic, and I tried starting off writing in Dutch, but yeah, that never really went anywhere. Like, I think I still have them, but yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. And one of the reasons was because I was constantly confronted with my dyslexia when I was trying to. I did a lot of contests at the time, which I do recommend if you are starting out to do that, because they help you like deal with deadlines and stuff, and short stories. I recommend all writers to start with short stories. It's like whenever somebody comes, oh, I'm writing a book, and like, have you tried writing a short story? And what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, it's hard to learn anyone to write when they take on a big project right off the bat.
Yeah. I think I should certainly. I would have been much better off starting with some short stories.
Yeah.
Just to, because you do need to develop your craft, and and one of the reasons why my first novel took me 3 years to write is because, you get halfway through a novel, 50 or 60,000 words in, and you suddenly realise that you need to rewrite the first half because, it's, just the mechanics of how novels work, but also just your own style, the voice that you write
sentences. Learn how to write a sentence. That's
everything. I mean, it's like how do you write dialogue? And how do you sort of describe sort of the scenes in which something is set? Any number of things.
Yeah.
It's how do you? Yeah, exactly. How do you distinguish between your characters properly? It's just things like it can be anything. It took me ages to sort of realize that this group of friends I was reading about, they'd have nicknames for one another. And that's how they'd refer to one another because they spend a lot of time together.
Yeah.
Whereas I started off with a bit more of a Victorian thing where everybody was, Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones.
It's hard to find a balance because it does add that little bit of flavor.
It does.
But when they're talking with friends, you call each other by those nicknames. Like A-Grain would be called Iggy. Well, in the I
So-
am still rewriting the goddamn Wrench in the Machine. I now have a new proofreader who helps me, go through the Wrench in the Machine and finally properly solve that. I already removed a lot of mistakes. Fortunately, I already fixed a lot in it by recording the audiobook, which I still need to finish. But fortunately, no one has backed the audiobook yet. But
No. Although speaking of audiobooks, I built an audio booth in my house last year.
Okay.
That's why I made a couple of mistakes. I bought the wrong sort of microphone and a few other bits and pieces, and then had to rebuy again. But I mean, it's that's a whole other level of adventure still to come.
It's a skill into itself, and I'm redoing. Like I already recorded the Wrench in the Machine, and I was like, I need to redo this. Fortunately, I am happy with the Bound for the Styx audiobook. That is done. That's also available, by the way, on various audiobook stores. But I hope people will get it from the Kickstarter. But
Was
yeah,
that the first one that you did? The first audiobook that you did?
the full novel one. I mean, for my videos, I also recorded stories and stuff like that. And I learned doing audio stories through my radio show I did for Fallout 4, that was also my first real writing gig. And I also learned doing sound effects and stuff like that by doing that project. And that I then finally took with me into the Radio Retrofuture shows and the Association of Ishtar videos that we've done. If we have more art, I really want to continue that. So go support the Kickstarter or just buy my books on Amazon in the future. That will also work. But
I'm just reading your Wrench in the Machine, or
Oh.
rather, I downloaded the sample. But so I'll let you know once I've got a bit further into it. But I'm enjoying it so far. I do like the setting.
Fortunately, everyone is enjoying it. But like, I'm going to an event this weekend, and all the books I have are like old editions that still have so many errors in them, and it's like, but I mean, it's for a Dutch audience, so they don't notice as much.
Yeah.
Fortunately. Most people have really enjoyed the Wrench in the Machine, and there's nothing like quite like it that I'm aware of at the moment. But we'll see what people in the future think. But I think
I similarly, I have my writing process, or my sort of publishing process, is write the book, and then I develop the paperback first, because one of my friends, who's also an author, we do one another's proofreading.
Okay,
So,
awesome.
and he prefers paperback format, and it encourages me to get the artwork sorted, get the blurb written for the back, laid all that kind of stuff. So I do a draft copy, and then I'll get 2 or 3 printed. Send one to him, send one to another editor that I've got, and keep on for myself. And after a while, you sort of, particularly ones that have taken a couple of sort of drafts to complete. I've got a bit of a bookshelf building up of these sort of, by definition, incredibly limited edition sort of novels, because they are the ones that are fully marked up by my editors, by me, and by whoever else. So that should I ever become rich and famous, I'll give those away as like a Kickstarter or something like that. Somebody who has more space in the house than I do, and who might want to see that, because so much of what we do is digital these days. The fingerprints get lost over time. There is no archaeology to uncover and discover how these things were written.
Yeah, it's difficult. Like I for my profit margins, it doesn't matter if people buy the ebook or the physical copy. Matter of fact, especially when you're doing your own distribution, you're thankful if most people buy the audiobooks, buy the ebooks, because you don't have to send them out. There is no transportation cost and stuff like that. But the ones I sell, I distribute for Europe myself, and then I can sign them So that's the benefit that
Ah.
the people in Europe will have.
So
Um,
you don't do print on demand then? You get
well, I do, but when you order the Kickstarter, you also get special things.
oh,
So it's not just when you order with your Kickstarter, you do stretch goals and stuff. So if they participate in the Kickstarter, they'll also get bookends. They'll get all this other stuff as well. So you know, it's not
yeah.
just it's not just the book. It's like all the extras as well, that you will not get from purchasing on Amazon. And this is something I also need to do. Because I right now the only books that are officially published are The Wrench in the Machine and S36 The Call Girl. But when the Kickstarter is done, I'm gonna release 321's Notebook, which is a supplement to Wrench in the Machine. It's there's all the short stories that are in the Wrench in the Machine, but also some extra ones, and they're all like graphically illustrated. So yeah, you get some stories double, but if you have both books, but some people really prefer to read them in this new format, because in the novel, well, it's a novel, and they're supposed to be files, they're supposed to be documents you find in the world, and 321's Notebook kind of helps you with that experience.
Yeah,
Um, and the same goes for the Arkology companion, which was the first experiment in this anthology. Is this Arkology? Just the Arkology companion. And like 321's Notebook, like as you can see, like all the
yeah.
pages are illustrated. So yeah, and
Fair enough.
yeah, yeah, a lot of people love this more than Bound for the Styx itself. But everyone I got feedback from medical proofreaders say that the Bound in the Styx is 4 times as good as the Wrench in the Machine. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I have made great progress, I must say, since I wrote The Wrench in the Machine. That's why The Wrench in the Machine is something. I mean, I'm proud of the content, but I'm embarrassed about the writing and the formatting and that stuff of the first edition. So I've been doing my best to update it regularly, so people will get
Mm. Well,
Um,
um the trilogies that I finished, they're kind of set now as far as I'm concerned. But one of the things I decided to do was every time I brought a new book out, I would edit the previous books in the series, which out to be an absolute stone around my neck for the third book in each series, because the archaeological adventure one, I had finished writing one book and I would go back and re-edit book one, and then re-edit book two, and by that point, you need a bit of distance, I think, when you're editing your own work, and then I would
mhm.
re-edit book three, the one that I just finished writing. But that in itself. I mean, editing 3 novels back to back that you've written, it's a big job. So,
Yeah.
but it was amazing the stuff that I picked up. Just because there was a couple of years separating me from the first book I'd written, and a couple of years or a year from the second one. But I think it was well worth doing. It was just yeah, it drove me crazy. But and the same with my Glass Darkly dieselpunk series. I sort of the artwork, and you know what it's like. You're sort of commissioning artwork and talking to an artist about sort of getting things just right. And at
Hmm.
the same time, you're doing edits of the story that you've just written. But I was going back and re-editing the first 2 stories at the same time. And yeah, it's a huge, huge task. I think it's one of the reasons why I've never really promoted the books, because by the time I'd finished editing all 3 of them, and I decided to recover the first book in the series so that it matched the second book in the series, because I'd changed artists halfway through,
Hmm.
because my first artist had just disappeared off
Yeah,
the
yeah,
surface of the
that
planet.
happens quite frequently. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the second artist was really difficult to track down because he was just known by the name Svar on 99 Designs. And I thought, well, okay, trying to find. So I was going everywhere, all the different art websites, and eventually I managed to track him down. And he had spotted when he spotted one, he's one of the messages I was sending. He then immediately spotted all the others. But because it had been a couple of years since I'd gotten to do the second book, it was a nightmare. But I really liked his artwork, and so I was recovering book 3, or covering book 3 with a new cover, recovering book 1 with a cover in the same style as book 2, and then bringing them all out, and it's it's a big old job, but I love the cover art now. So it's which at some point I keep saying I get it properly printed and put it on the wall because I like that kind of thing. But that kind of neatly leads me on to one of the questions, which I sort of prepared for you, because like last time, I was sort of this is really my first attempt at sort of reaching out to other creatives and sort of figuring out how other people work and why they work that way and all that kind of stuff. So you've got quite a bit of stuff out now. What's your process for actually writing, coming up with new ideas? Do you have people that you bounce ideas off?
Well, especially like technical details, because I'm not a technical person at all. Fortunately, in our costume group, we have a number of technical people who really come up with like technical solutions for things. Like, for example, and this character is also he also has a character in the book, by the way, who came up with the idea for a rebreather system that works on mushrooms. So when they go into the ether, they have like these mushroom canisters with them that do the breathing for them, so to speak. So that's an idea that I came from, and there are many other ideas that I got from people, that I probably already forgotten that those ideas came from them. But like I have a lamp in the living room, and that lamp inspired the idea of veil generators in Bound for the Styx, which are lamps that prevent holes in the veil, the barrier between worlds from opening up, so to speak, from which monsters pour in. That's where that idea comes from. So now all the Igraine, the main character, starts off being a scav by carrying one of such lamps during an expedition. And and then but the funny thing is, once you think of that idea, like, okay, you've got a lamp that stops these creatures from coming through, so they also have to have a portable version of it, because they go then into the depths where those lamps are not present, so they need to carry one. And then it's like, okay, well, you're gonna I kind of imagine it was like either a kid's job, or because they need protection anyway, or like someone who doesn't do much hard labor, like a technician or something, someone who's like doing solitary things apart from everyone else. A cook could also do it, basically, when you think about it, I guess.
That's
in some way, although cooks already is quite a responsibility, I have to say. But yeah, it's possible.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, oddly enough, when we were talking to Laura last week, I almost confessed one of the things I struggled with the most in one of my novels, which was set in the 1930s, and I have a scene where good guys, group of friends, pursuing this ancient sort of artifact, they meet up with the bad guys, who in my stories are they're a group of female assassins, and I don't know if you ever saw, it's a bit of an aside, but did you ever see the Three Musketeers, the films with like Oliver Reed and I forget, sort of Richard
Leonardo DiCaprio was in one, I think.
Oh, the one before that, the series before that. There were two films that they filmed. Controversially, they filmed them. They paid the actors once, and they told them they were filming one one film, but they actually turned it into 2 feature-length movies.
Oh,
And
really?
I,
Interesting.
I think it's from like the 80s or something like that, 1980s. But fantastic series, absolutely brilliant. But the one of the lead bad guys in it is the Lady de Winter, who is like a spy for the Cardinal Richelieu. And one of the ideas that I had for my own stories was, well, you know, there's one of the Three Musketeers goes on to become the leader of the Jesuit order around the world. So he's a priest in the stories, Aramis, and in one of the later books, which has never been made into a film, he becomes the head of the Jesuit order. And I thought, well, okay, I'll have the bad guys being related to the Jesuit order, which was subsequently disavowed by the Pope and all that kind of stuff at the time before reforming into its modern day equivalent, which is entirely respectable, I should add. I thought, you know, this guy's he's had direct experience of female spies and female assassins in the form of Milady de Winter. There's the history of the Jesuits and their infiltration of all the different courts around the world was one of the reasons they got disavowed. I thought, well, they're an all-male order. Why doesn't he set up a group of female assassins to do one thing or another, but in particular to preserve the status quo and stop heretical objects and artifacts from being discovered that might challenge the status quo. So that's the origin of the bad guys. But anyway, back to the main. I had them all turning up at a glamorous hotel in Greece, in the ancient city of Corinth, which has a big set of sort of ruins nearby. And the thing that stopped me in my tracks was I got the bad guys, these folks that sort of, you know, when they're in the field, they're all dressed like, you know, the sort of female aviators of the time, you know, boots and sort of, you know, trousers and all that kind of stuff. As soon as it got to the point where they're in you know, a luxury hotel and they're coming in to dine in the evening, and I go, okay, I need to describe what they're wearing. And I don't know about you, but my knowledge of female frocks is very limited. So I was sort of writing, and I was mid-flow, and I'm trying to describe what these attractive young women are wearing with these glamorous ball gowns they're wearing in this ballroom in this hotel in Greece, and I just had absolutely no idea. I thought, well, one of them can be wearing silk and chiffon, and another one maybe satin, or no. I just had to go and find a costume museum that got a reasonably good website and start looking up sort of different things. But I thought what I needed was a Laura, who I could have just contacted and gone, Laura, help, I need 3 glamorous-looking frocks that I can describe quite easily that fit these three villains or these 3 antagonists. But yes, but I didn't. We didn't quite get that far in our chat last week, so it's just like, you know. So yeah, so that's one of the things that's tripped me up. There must be something similar from your own creative endeavours that has stopped you dead, where you've gone, how does that work? I've got no idea. How do I describe
I
that?
mean, I went into a bit of a rabbit hole when I started investigating British police history and the history of policing to get the details on the Range in the Machine ride of, you know, that the Dover Borough Police, because they had borough police back then, not the national police. And London had like 2 separate police forces, one for the greater London and one for the inner London, which the Metropolitan Police Force, which, if I recall correctly, also had some more diplomatic functions as well. Anyway, so that was quite a rabbit hole, and I don't know how far you've gotten in the Range in the Machine, but it also talks about Associate 321's experiences in Liberia. That was interesting because that is a history that's been thoroughly tucked away. Whenever I looked about the history of Liberia, which for the viewers who don't know this, is a former United States colony for black people. Originally for people of color, but it soon became blacks only. And that experiment didn't turn out so well. I think it's right now one of the poorest countries in the world, actually, and their history has been thoroughly destroyed through civil war. They intentionally, by the way, destroyed much of their history. And well, I mean, when I say they, I'm actually referring to the various tribes that live there, which makes it even more complicated. But yeah, it's a tragic history of what transpired there, and all I got when I started looking about like Liberia was that, well, the Liberian Americans, as they called themselves, were treated the local population terribly. And it's like, okay, but do you have examples of this? And eventually, I found a book called Mississippi in Africa, which is an actual place in Liberia, and it was about one of the biggest slaveholders in Africa and the United States. He was a black man. Also a former slave himself. He escaped and went to Liberia. And I guess he became an inspiration for one of the more villainous characters in The Wrench in the Machine. Although it's not an important character. It's a character in 321 met during his lifetime. But you know, that also like describes. I try to describe like why they returned to slavery and very viciously. And it was basically, well, everyone was doing slavery, you know. And when you go to Rome, you know, act like the Romans. That was really the mentality that they had. But yeah,
the Romans, the Egyptians, the Greeks, Persians, everybody. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but it's also about a little bit of other lost history, which is the West Africa Squadron. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, no.
Well, do you know who ended the transatlantic slave trade?
I don't.
That was the West Africa Squadron.
No.
Yeah. Did you know
Tell
that
me more.
Yes, your country fought a 60-year-long war against slavery.
Well, there you go. That's something I did not know.
But you know how you rewarded those people?
Go on, embarrass me.
Yes, they have one little plaque in Sierra Leone that reminded them that was it's on a house that was a place where they brought the slaves they liberated.
Yeah.
That's the only reward. That's how they're remembered.
Yeah,
To be fair, you've been paying for their war up to 2014, I believe.
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, it's but I find it fascinating because I'm never sure how much sort of some of this news sort of travels outside the UK, but I had a thing a while ago of a load of folks protesting because one of the old sort of seafaring cities that we've got in the UK is Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
Huge port, very desirable location to sort of to live and work these days. You know, there's lots of things there, but the docks have been converted, but they still have a lot of statues to the founders of the city, many of whom made their fortune by dealing in slaves, or you know, the triumvirate of sort of the products of slaves, rum, and cotton. And anyway, somebody decided to take offence, and they wanted to pull the statue down, and they ended up doing so.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. Yeah.
And so I suppose in one respect you have to sort of go, well, actually, yeah, we do have a lot of these sort of statues around, and I'm inclined to look at these things as, you know, as an amateur historian, I know that the past is another country. I know that the values were radically different, and that we can't. Well, I don't think we can judge the past by modern day standards. In the same way, I think years from now, people will judge our modern times by a radically different standard again. And yes, if a particular statue offends, then perhaps it should be taken down and put somewhere else for posterity. But yeah, but it's odd that we have these hugely expensive sort of bronze statues all around the country. A lot of the folks that did some very suspect deeds. Yeah, like you say, sort of things like the West Africa Company. Was it the West Africa Company?
West African Squadron, yeah.
West African Squadron, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never heard of them before, and
Yep.
the odds of me finding the
60
or
years.
going at Sierra Leone.
60 years of war.
Precisely. I mean, it's crazy. But then I know one of the other rabbit holes I went down is I was sending my archaeological characters to Rome at one point in the 1930s. And I've been to Italy a couple of times. I've never been to Rome. So I thought, well, this will be all right. I'll do my usual thing. I'll have a look on Google Maps, look around, find a few nice old buildings that were around at the time. And then, maybe sort of dig out a map or two and all this kind of stuff. And for any of your audience who haven't researched novels in the way that me and Bonsot clearly have, it's just a recipe for disaster because you start looking at these things. And I didn't realise, but Mussolini, the dictator, famously deposed dictator, was the person responsible for clearing out a lot of the medieval architecture in Rome.
That's
And
probably,
for
I can
revealing-
imagine, yeah.
Yeah, revealing a lot of the great long sort of streets and roadways that we associate with Rome these days and think of them because he wanted to reveal the classical architecture. So it was quite sort of deliberate about just getting rid of all the rubbish that he didn't like in the middle, because Rome was quite a congested city that had been built, one piece on top of another at the time.
Yeah.
So I ended up sort of I'd figured out where the characters were going to be, roughly where the characters were going to be staying, how they were going to get to the Vatican, which was one part of the story, and all that kind of stuff. And then discovered that all the roads had changed in the 1920s and 30s, just as these characters were going to be getting there. So I then had to dig out a road map from, sort of the 1890s or something like that, and figure out what the old roads looked like. And it changed the story. So I had them turning up while Rome was a building site. And because it was a building site, that's one of the things that helped them to break into this building they needed to break into in order to get down into the subterranean depths that lay below it, where the bad guys had got sort of one of their secret lairs. And I look at it now and I go, well, if I hadn't stumbled across the fact that, lots of bits of Rome were being demolished and new roads were being built and monuments were being put up, how would I have got them down into that labyrinth? And it's I have no idea. But,
I mean, there's many things like that, where you're doing your research and then you're like, oh, that's perfect,
Yeah.
And the same went for, Associate 321, and, to really build up his character, that history that he started on the cigar on the tobacco plantations, escaped.
Yeah.
Only the Navy hired blacks at the time, so he joined the Navy. He participated in the Mexican War. He was already in Africa by the time that the Civil War broke out, but then he kind of remained with the West Africa Squadron because he got disillusioned with Liberia. And that's kind of how he entered the world of the Association by what he discovered on one of those slave ships.
Yeah.
And then he always carries cigars with them. That's his thing, and he is very proud of his. He kind of has this weird pride for his knowledge on tobacco. And,
Which,
yeah.
do you also happen to have a knowledge of tobacco?
No, not particularly. I do smoke pipe from time to time, but I'm not really a smoker. I usually smoke pipe when I'm on events, and people enjoy the smell of that, so it's a win-win in that regard. And, then I enjoy the ritual. I barely smoke at home, if any. I recently bought some tobacco for the first time in years. ever since the big plague hit, I have not been away much. So yeah. But yeah, it was. I thought it was a fun little detail to include with him. Where some guy, some British person, and you got to understand that at the time, like the British were really engaged with the whole anti-slavery thing. They wrote articles and like, what has the West African Squadron done this time? So it was like a really big thing at the time, and and then he's like a guest at a witness's house, and he offers him a cigar, and he sees, oh look, these are like cigars from this area, where I grew up, and then he kind of like explains the history of cigars, and because that's the only positive thing that he got from that time, so.
Yeah.
Kind of like embarrasses his host because of that when he tells, well, that, I grew up on one of those things, and the American Civil War was, like, for him, 6 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that sort of leads me. You're doing a great job. I know. I should say I've written these questions down, but I haven't shared them with you. But you're doing a great job of leading me naturally towards my next question, which was, how do you go about designing or inventing your characters? Because I struggle with this a little bit. I design certain elements. I figure out what the characters will need to do, and then try and think of ways to make them sort of more distinct and more interesting and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you've clearly got a very specific sort of look in mind for several of your characters based on the figures that you've got. So
I'm trying to look where I've got 320 watts notebook, but I do not have it here. Yeah, I mean, this is the cover of the first book. When I commission artists, what I say is essentially that all the characters need to look like 90% historically Victorian for 1870 or 1878. And you can also see it here, and it has clearly influence from Art Deco and particular posters and stuff. So I look a lot at posters that I like from the 1930s. I love that particular style of pulp in particular.
Yeah.
So I really set my parameters, and I want everything to look as historically accurate as possible where it needs to be, so that these science fiction elements really pop out. But when it comes to Arkology, this logo was designed by a friend of mine who is no longer with us. Yeah, this is. Let me see. I happened to share a photo on Facebook today. That how do I say? That inspired one of the scavs that's also on the Kickstarter poster. And we do costuming. We do our own costuming as well. So that's how the association, the associate costume, came about. That miniature is actually based on a photo of mine. Igraine, which is unfortunate that I do not. No, I have it here. Yeah. So this is 321's notebook, which is the supplement to the Wrench in the Machine, which also contains all the stories that inspired all of the characters. And here, if it's sharp, you get to see how Igraine looked like when she arrived on Atlas. And this is an Art Deco witch.
Yeah.
And her worlds, in her world, people think that their very advanced technology is actually magic. Even though it's just it's cyberpunk technology, but they're taught it's magic. Her original creation. This also, I guess, it comes into my creation process. Her original creation was originally a criticism of Clark Tech. That's how I came up with the concept. I started with that concept Okay, I
Yeah.
want to have a criticism of Clark Tech. I want to have a character that believes that their technology is actually magic.
Yeah.
Okay, how does the association come into contact with such a being? Well, if they go to their own world, you get like the typical kind of Star Trek world where, but you also have to describe the whole world. And I didn't want to describe the whole world. I wanted to describe the philosophy and the problems that come with that philosophy. So I brought her to their world instead, multiverse, and she cannot go home. And so that's was the story actually. It's a girl that can't go home. She's stuck in a world she does not understand because she believes that all technology is magical. So she's driving all the scientists nuts because they want to send her back, so they cannot explain to her. Well, actually, they cannot do that. So
Yeah.
they're really stuck with her, and they're also trying to understand her in the same time to figure out how these
Yeah.
people think and how they approach technology and. So it's a really analysis of that. But I wrote that. But yeah, we were talking about design. Yeah, and I really wanted to have like this cyberpunk design that's also Art Deco that really displays a lot of grandeur, but also again like the ancient stuff as well. So you automatically come up with Art Deco. And then I kind of like created this schoolgirl in Art Deco wizard robes. So I googled flapper girls. I
Yeah.
copied
Yeah.
one of their hats, made it a little bit more witch-like.
Yeah.
And later, she also had a doll that was similarly dressed. That became Enwyn, which you can, if you watch the stream, you can see her dance on the birthday image here.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. That's really I mean, I've done sort of similar in terms of figuring certain things, but a lot of the times I just start off with images. So the bad guys in my first series were inspired by a picture of Amelia Earhart,
mm,
just stood in front of one of the planes that she was going to be flying. And then I researched a couple of the other famous female aviatrix from the time, and I thought, okay, so that's what I want them to look like. That's maybe a bit more of a uniform, but I like the coming up with the philosophy, the world sort of idea, and designing characters from that, and figuring out what would make it difficult for her to go home. Well, she doesn't want to go home, and why doesn't she want to go home? Because it's heresy, or she is a heresy, or something like that if she does go home. So yeah, so that's sort of interesting. So,
mhm.
it's,
Yeah, well, I'm a high concept writer, and that makes all the difference because modern writers are taught to think about a hero's journey and think from like very character centric perspective, and
yeah,
the high concept writing as the original Star Trek used to do.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
kind of like I don't know. I don't. It's never talked about.
yeah,
Um, because when you look up information about high concept writing, and then it says, "Oh well, it's any story whose premise can be summarized into a what if question,"
yeah,
which in the case of Igraine is most definitely the case. But what makes high concept like Blade Runner and those films so excellent is that you start with a simple premise, but then you actually throw a character in that situation, and then you go on an exploration on how that character would behave, how people react to her, and and then it becomes something very complex.
yeah,
And that's no longer talked about. Every author tuber is all about the hero's journey, and
yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, I start off with again with a high concept, and my archaeological sort of adventure series all about immortality and the quest for the fountain of youth, um, and what that would mean. You know, not just in general, but particularly for modern people. What would it mean for you if, you know, you suddenly had an unlimited lifespan, living in your prime for however long. And the same with sort of the dieselpunk sort of series that I've got. You know, because that's based around the idea of a multiverse. It's like, well, how would that impact? You know, on what would it be like if you came across another version of yourself from a very similar world to yours, but not your world? What kind of conversations would you have? How would that work? And yeah, and same with sort of the ghost story that I've got, where it actually revolves around the idea of Vikings, or more accurately, the very early history of the Nordic peoples and their sort of creation myth, where sort of Odin is supposed to have come along and killed Ymir, one of the Jotun, or the trolls, and it's like, but I'm quite interested in sort of prehistory, so I'm going, well, is that actually just an allegory for sort of a deist-based culture as opposed to an animist-based culture? So again, that's sort of a foundation there, just to sort of sort of think about sort of what that would mean. And it's that kind of story, the high concept story, that stuff that really gets you thinking, that I just can't get enough of. So yeah, so I suspect I'm going to enjoy your story. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bound for Styx is written in a very similar way in that regard, with a lot of questions like that. And even on the question of immortality, I've got one very interesting, because one of the interesting things is that people often do not question, why are humans not immortal to begin with. And one of the reasons is that we have a built-in timer to expire. And one of the reasons for that is cancer.
yeah,
So we are programmed to die in time before cancer gets us, basically.
well, yeah, it's I think it's a fascinating idea, and one of the questions that I pose throughout my novel, or my novels, because again, one of the reasons for having a group of people, group of adventurers, is so that they can take differing views and discuss different things.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
And on the one side, I've got characters that are going, well, if you live longer, then it doesn't matter how humble your origin or your upbringing, you've got more time to make something of your life and get to the point where you're enjoying life.
More
And at
time
the
to
same
procrastinate.
time, exactly, or to procrastinate, or to be taken advantage of by sort of evil capitalists or whatever.
No,
But that's the kind of conversation.
no links for the novel. If you're talking about his novel, no, not yet. I'll add them to the descriptions later, or I'll post them in self-promotion on our Discord. So
I will do that. Yes.
yeah. Excuse me. We had some difficulties at the start of the stream, so apologies. But yeah, those should have been included. I completely forgot about that in the rush. But yeah, they'll be posted in the description later.
Well, I have actually updated my profile now with a link to my website, so you can find details of all my novels there as well.
Oh, on the Discord, you mean?
Yeah, my Discord. I don't know how you get to whether I can get to somebody else's profile, but
Let's see. I can just in case send the Discord link in the chat here. And oh god, yeah, then you get this. Let me.
I won't start clicking around, otherwise I'll end up accidentally cutting off the connection. So.
Yeah, again. God damn it. But yeah, I'll post it in a moment. But yeah, they'll be included in the video description eventually. But yeah, the immortality question, like, it's gonna become part of our series as well, because we have something that is called P25. It's one of the more recent stories, but I wrote it before I started with Bound for the Styx. However, that was originally posed as a what's it called? A vaccine against cancer. That was the original idea about it. Because I needed something that everyone would want, that no one could say, oh, this is a bad thing. That was the idea about it. However, the association had to oppose it. So that was what the story was about originally. It was supposed to be a vaccine, and the thing is that an odd recommendation, YouTube. Okay, well, welcome, Raby Rumlard. We're discussing story writing at the moment, and we're gonna close it up in 15 minutes or so. We're already going long for a show, but that's fine. I'm having a good time.
Apologies, I do have another question for you, but you're in the middle of saying something.
Okay, so I'm gonna make this quick then. But yeah, so it's a vaccine for cancer. But then I learned about how the telomeres and why the telomeres exist, which is one of the elements in our genes that determine our lifespan. And then I was like, well, maybe this vaccine actually expands your life, and the whole cancer vaccine thing is just a side thing about it, a side effect.
Well, not oddly enough, it's one of the reasons why I was sort of focused on immortality is because back in the day when I was at university, I studied philosophy. And for my final year dissertation, I decided to do something about, to write my dissertation about death and immortality. And I was, the typical sort of undergraduate at the time, so I was sort of reading lots of things, didn't have a coherent idea what I was doing. But at some point, I stumbled across, within the UK, there's a charity that's focused on aging and aging well, and they'd written a couple of articles that I found about. So it's the Society of Gerontology, it's called, but they'd written a couple of articles just about sort of telomeres and aging and the latest research. And I had a bit of a correspondence with one of their lead researchers because I sort of asked him for a bit more information about these articles, and they sent me a load of stuff. And I think they must have thought I was a science undergrad rather than a philosophy undergrad. Anyway, I read all of it and tried to make as much sense of it as I could. But one of the things that they said, one of the conclusions they came to, is that we don't know when it's going to happen. They were talking about things like cancer and the fact that, aging is really a sort of, in humans anyway, it's about sort of maintenance versus damage. You build up damage by living and breathing and being active, and your body repairs a certain amount of it. And, as technologies improve, the rate of damage will gradually will stay the same, but the amount of repair could possibly be improved upon and increased. But one of the things they said is that, you could view cancer in the same way. Cancer is, cells that become mutated because they haven't died when they're supposed to, or become senescent when they're supposed to. So, but I'm waffling, but the takeaway was they said, or the conclusion they came to was, they said, we don't know when it's going to happen, but we think that there won't be a gradual breakthrough that will lead to significantly longer human lives. It will just happen by accident. And it will happen without anybody realizing, is it a vaccine that has been developed for one thing? I won't mention, what it may have been developed for. Is it a cure for cancer that's actually proven to be far more effective than anybody was anticipating? But what they were basically suggesting was that, it's quite likely, or quite possible anyway, that you'll go from being essentially immortal one day to being immortal the next day without anybody realizing. And it may well have already happened.
Yeah.
Not that you become bulletproof, but just that, the advances in medical technology something will happen, and without realizing it, will tip the balance, and your bodies will end up sort of getting to the point where it can maintain itself almost indefinitely. Hopefully without also getting sort of 1,001 cells becoming cancerous in the process. But there you go.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, we'll see what happens in the future. I thought Altered Carbon's take on it was interesting, where you got like this like immortal elite that's just accumulating wealth and wealth and wealth because they don't die, and then like this underclass, because they do die and cannot build up the same amount of wealth because of it. So I thought that was very interesting.
It is,
and
yeah.
Until the sister character was introduced, and that whole series went downhill. But
it did, yeah, a little bit, but I still really enjoyed it. It's
oh yeah, I just hated the parts where the sister character was in. I just despised that character.
Yeah, it was a bit of a didn't quite sort of work for me either. It was
Yeah. Well, I mean, the actress who played her was not very convincing. Let's just say that, and it was just anime at that point. Yeah.
No, but again, talking about the philosophy, like you were earlier on, that entire philosophy that they invented around Kel and Kellism, it added a level of depth to the story that I really enjoyed. And again, when it came to like the Songspire trees and the aliens, must get around to reading more of those books, because they're not going to make any more of the TV series, that's for sure. So reading the books, definitely an option.
Yeah.
The other big question I have for you,
All right.
and again, I apologize for these things. You seem to have a very clear sort of set of products that you've developed. Very clear storylines that you developed, very clear set of artwork and figures, bookends, everything else. So, and I was just wondering how far it extends. It's like, do you? Because I have, a number. I mean, like I say, I'm intent on writing the series that I've currently written into. Each series will be a book of 3 trilogies, or a set of 3 trilogies, so 9 books for each one. That's what I've planned out so far. The Ghost story will be at least a trilogy, but and then I've got another set of stories which I haven't even started yet, but I've already partially mapped out, based around AI, because that's another sort of topic that I'd really like to delve into. So that one's probably not going to be based in the 1930s, and that's it. And I get new ideas all the time, and I add them to the pile, and it's like I need about another 500 years to write all of these things, or I need more time to write these things anyway. What are sort of the future plans for your Association of Ishtar, for your stories, for the universe that you're building? Because it seems to me that you've already put a lot of thought into it, and you've probably got a lot lined up. I don't know whether you're happy to talk about it or not.
No, yeah, sure. But like you said, it's a lot. Well, I hope to have an interesting conversation in April that might greenlit a game. So we'll see if that happens. So, but yeah, I am now finishing up Enwin, which is about the dancing doll in the corner there. Which is also a character in the Rage in the Machine. Well, no, she's not a character in the Rage in the Machine. She's just a little doll. But I developed that relationship that Enwin has with the doll in the Bound for the Styx, and people really love that dynamic. However, Igraine is growing up. She's becoming a woman. So the doll loses its significance, but really, people really love that doll. So, and when it becomes alive, I will not spoil how that happens. But you can read them actually on the Association of Ishtar.com if you want spoilers. The drafts are on there. And that's gonna be Enwin, Adventures in Responsible Doll Ownership. That's nearly done. I'm refining the final chapters. Then we are is dieselpunk steampunk? Well, kinda yes. We talked about that at the start of the stream, except that I don't know if that was recorded properly, because there was problems with the sound I noticed. So I hope that's recorded. And otherwise, we'll talk about it again, because I've got a feeling that Peter has a lot more questions for me.
I do.
Yeah, let's save that then for next week. I don't have a guest then, so we can do these conversations regularly. And we still haven't properly talked about
Really?
your book, so it's only suitable that we do.
Well, I mentioned it in passing, so we'll get there eventually.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
eventually. But yeah, dieselpunk is kind of steampunk. I think that Peter and I kind of like have a pretty similar vision on that. We might, okay. He nods. So
another
I think,
facet of the multiverse. But
yeah. But so where was I going? Yeah, so we've got Adventurers, Irresponsible Dual Ownership. That's the next book. I actually already started like playing with some ideas for the follow-up book, except then it takes place in Arkology, the setting of Bound for the Styx. Are we familiar with an audio drama called The Gearheart? My girlfriend is big. I have not. Can you make a note of that? Then I'll continue my story. So that's the one that I'm gonna do. Then I want to continue the Coffin Girls. That's introduced actually in this little comic. It's 2 stories. One is the Call Girl, which is the first story I ever written for the series and the foundation of the entire series. So that's what this little book. It's very thin, it's very small, it's not very expensive. However, the artwork is great. It's a comic. It's me learning how to make comics. However, the short story that is included, that's the Coffin Girls, is all about these. Do I have I do have an image in here of that machine. It's actually, I'm very proud
you
of
showed
this.
one last week.
Yeah.
But,
It's one of for those who are new here. It's done by one of the original BattleTech artists.
it's just a great picture.
It is by Eldon Culger. I'm very grateful for him. Because he even did it for free in the end because he was not happy with it himself. But yeah, it's about female pilots battling aliens in machines. There are also penal troopers, so there was this whole politics about the penal troops having to fight aliens because no one else will. And the next one is gonna be something in a similar vein, except then it's volunteers battling aliens in power armors. Called hazard suits, because they have to pretend they are not a security force, but fumigators.
Yeah. Well, before you move on from the Coffin Girls, I really like that picture. If you ever get to the point where you print them like an art print, let me know because I'd love to have a picture of that on the wall.
I can include it on what's it called, Zazzle, I think, and then you can order it from there. And then I get like a little commission.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. It's
okay.
I just love that style of art. Sorry, carry on.
But I'll clad it on Zessel then. That shouldn't be an issue. And that's, I'm already working on other stuff as well. I'm foreshadowing some stuff because we are preparing to make a potential game. We are currently also working on a world anvil, and I've written some articles on my blog on elements within the Association of Ishtar, how they're divided in between various factions. On the Kickstarter, and you can have this story for just $1, by the way. Any backer has access to these. Explains the origins of one of the special committee where the Association of Ishtar actually hijacks a non-profit organization. To use it for their own ends, and
it's a great idea. I like the concept.
Yeah, I thought so too. So that's why I included, and it's that they're like specialized in botanics. So yeah. Oh, never mind. I just asked her. It only works on the LibreVox app because it was created around 205. It's not, and is not maintained. Send us a link, either on social media or Discord or whatever, or to the Kickstarter. I think you can send messages on the Kickstarter as well. I'd be interested to hear it, because I only listen to audiobooks anyway. But where was I going?
At the risk of pushing you further than you'd like to go right now, I mean, last week we were talking to the film producers from Metropius.
Yeah.
I know there are a few sort of technical issues with it and all that kind of stuff, but you seem as though you're maybe leading in that direction yourself. You know, the style of artwork that you've got, not necessarily an animated film, but some kind of like film or sort of, you know,
Well,
more, you know, sort of more than sort of a, you know, book
oh,
or
it's a
comic book.
multimedia project. It's always intended to be a multimedia project.
Yeah.
And that's also why I wanted the miniatures to begin with.
Yeah.
And I hope to sell 20. Well, originally, when the original price was priced around, if I sold 20 of them, I made my money back on the commission. So that's kind of the strategy I'm following there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of my miscalculation, that didn't bid out so well during the first Kickstarter. That it cost me way too much money. I think I made a few hundred after taxes eventually, fortunately. But yeah, so I expect to do a lot more. I hope to reach with this Kickstarter about 3,000, and now it's 1,600. So.
Well, you seem to be off to a flying start.
Oh yeah, but now it hasn't moved for days now, so. And then that kind of frustrates me. So you can make me happy just for $1. You make me a happy man at this moment. Yeah. But we'll see. Maybe during the weekend I can get some more backers on it, and we'll see. Yeah. And I also have not exceeded the number of backers of the previous project yet either. So 3 more. I need 3 more backers. So got on that, folks.
How much longer is it open for? Is it
the special? The full project till April 1st, but we now have a special offer, a special tier, the birthday bash tier, and that gives you like a discount on ebooks. So, but you get a discount on all the tiers, but they're a lot more expensive. But we've got some people who got like the complete collection, and that's like,
Well, I saw that the 48-hour offer had obviously expired.
That one is expired, but the birthday bash is the same one, actually. But I did not know that it was Radio Retrofuture's birthday this week. Then I was like, oh, let's extend it, And now I extended it because of the event. So the birthday bash goes on till Saturday night, or at least my night. So probably for our American friends, somewhere around noon, probably. Yeah. So get on that. Let's see. Hold on. Rapes. It's called Gear Heart. Okay. 2 words. Okay. Thank you. The Gear Heart. Make note of that. Peter, you mind if we save the questions for the next time?
Absolutely, anytime. I'm happy to come back next week or any other time.
Yeah, all right. I'll see. Because I'm also trying to get Clara on. She's from Germany. She also wants to really see this Kickstarter succeed as well. So and said she wanted to ask like silly questions about the world's lore. You're of course welcome to join us. We'll see what happens then. I'll ask her what she wants to do, and otherwise you're free to come on. If there's any other people who want to be on the show, let me know. We can do that absolutely. Let's see. Okay, I can post it in Discord. I have one. Oh, that'd be great. Admin is Matlov. That's great. I posted the Discord link in the chat, and it should also be in the video recording. It should be the right one this time because I replaced it. The other one was an old one. But that should be fixed now. Oh, I'm so professional here. Really. But anyway, folks, Peter, thank you for being here. I'm gonna call it for today. Folks, if you have not already, please check out the Kickstarter. Tell your friends about it. If you do not have a credit card, we can arrange something else through PayPal or something else. There are other possibilities. And just for $1, you also get like Kickstarter exclusive content. It also has content by other creators as well. So you can, and they're very cheap books. It's very cheap ebooks. Like for $3, you have like About Demons. And they also have, if you have kids, there's also Little Wade and Watchtower on there, which is a multi-award-winning kids book in a steampunk theme. And I'm already trying to puzzle to turn that duo. It's also a hilarious podcast, by the way, I did with Sean about the origins of Little Wade and Watchtower. The boy is a ghost, and well, Watchtower is well a robot. Is a robot lamppost, and I have this idea to make a evil version of it. So. Well, not an evil version of it, but a sinister version of it. That's probably yeah. Okay. And people who in the chat think... Yo, go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, it's been great talking to you again, Bonsar. It's I'm sure I'll come up with another several dozen probing questions before I speak to you next. But yes, but equally, you know, I'm sure your audience may have other questions as well that they want to put to you.
Yeah. I do not have like a big audience during my live streams. I'm very curious what I'm doing wrong, but I'm very happy that some new ones in the chat. So thank you for being here, everyone. I really appreciate it. Maybe I should start the show later. I don't know, but we'll see. Let me know. I also posted questions on the community Discord as well. Like, is Edwin cute or creepy? The opinions are split, which is great.
Yeah.
Because the reactions to Edwin is, oh my god, she's so cute and creepy at the same time. And it's...
Yes, you're sure to have a massive following in Japan if that's the case. So.
Oh god, yeah, it would be great if... I think the Japanese audience would love the Association of Ishtar, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Especially Igraine and Edwin. Because there's also an isekai. Are you familiar with the term isekai?
No.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that next time then. And
I shall make notes and hold you to it.
Make notes. We'll talk about a little bit about isekai then, because there's an element of that in here as well. And with that, ladies and gentlemen,